Iran war and the world's hidden fertilizer crisis. Is a new storm of inflation coming? Imagine this. Somewhere in the world, a farmer is preparing for a new crop. He has already bought the seeds, the tractor is ready, and he is waiting for the rain. But at that very moment, thousands of kilometers away in the Middle East, missiles are being launched, drones are flying, and the fire of war is spreading. At first glance, these two events seem to have nothing to do with each other. But the truth is, if this war goes on for long, then the crop growing in that farmer's field could also be at risk. And if less crop grows in the field, the world's plate could also begin to empty. The question is, how can the impact of the Iran-Israel war reach all the way to farms and dining tables? Whenever news of war comes from the Middle East, the first discussion is usually about oil and gas prices. That is because this region is a major center of the world's energy supply. But this time, experts are pointing toward another danger, one that may prove even more serious than oil. That danger is the crisis of fertilizer supply. It is a crisis that appears slowly, but when its effects begin to show, it can create food inflation and even a food crisis across the world. The current conflict in the Middle East has once again reminded the world how deeply interconnected the global economy is. Rising tensions between Iran and Israel have made sea routes like the Strait of Hormuz unstable. This is the same narrow waterway that is considered one of the world's most important energy lifelines. Around 20 to 21 million barrels of crude oil pass through it every day. But very few people know that a large quantity of the world's fertilizer raw materials is also supplied through this region. West Asia, or the Gulf region, is not just a storehouse of oil. It is also a major center for the fertilizer industry. Countries like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Oman, and the UAE are major exporters of urea, ammonia, and sulfur. All of these chemicals are used to produce fertilizers for agriculture, especially nitrogen-based fertilizers, which are considered the foundation of nearly half of the world's agricultural production system. Iran itself is among the major producers of ammonia in the world. Ammonia is the chemical from which nitrogen fertilizers are made. It forms the base of the nutrients essential for plant growth. When a farmer adds urea or other fertilizers to the field, he is actually supplying nitrogen, which helps crops grow faster. Now the problem is that if production or shipping in this region is affected because of war, the fertilizer supply chain could break. And this effect does not show up immediately, but rather after a few months. That is because the farming cycle runs according to the seasons. If the farmer does not get fertilizer on time, then either he will use less fertilizer or he will sow a crop that gives lower output. This means that in the coming months, less grain will come out of the fields. And when there is less grain in the market, rising prices become inevitable. In recent months, movement in the fertilizer market has already become clearly visible. Fertilizer prices in the Middle East have risen sharply. In Europe, the price of ammonia has reached around $725 per ton. Production has declined at several plants and shipping routes have become unstable. This situation is also serious because the world's agricultural system has now become heavily dependent on fertilizers. According to the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, nearly 50% of global food production depends on nitrogen-based fertilizers. That means if fertilizer supply suffers a major shock, it can directly affect global food production. What makes this crisis even more complex is that many other fertilizer supplies in the world are already under pressure. Russia is the world's largest fertilizer exporter, but it alone cannot meet total global demand. Apart from that, China has imposed several restrictions in recent times on the export of phosphate fertilizers. Sulfur production has also been affected in some places in Qatar and other Gulf countries. Sulfur is also used in fertilizer production. That means pressure is rising simultaneously on multiple supply lines across the world. Now the question is, how much impact can this entire situation have on India? India is one of the largest agricultural countries in the world, but it is not fully self-reliant in fertilizer production. India imports around 2 million tons of fertilizer every month. In the case of some important fertilizers, India's dependence is even higher. For example, for MOP, meaning muriate of potash, India is almost 100% dependent on imports. For DAP, meaning diammonium phosphate, India imports around 60%. This means that if a crisis hits the global fertilizer market, India cannot remain completely unaffected. Every year, the Indian government gives heavy subsidies to make fertilizers available to farmers at affordable prices. In 2025, nearly 2 lakh crore rupees were spent on fertilizer subsidies. This is one of the largest agricultural subsidy programs in the world. If global prices rise rapidly, then it will become even more expensive for the government to maintain this subsidy. On the other hand, if the subsidy is reduced, the cost for farmers could increase. Experts believe that if the crisis in the Middle East continues for a long time, urea prices could rise by 30 to 40%. This will directly impact farmers' costs. Farming in India is already facing many challenges, such as uncertain weather, water shortage, and fluctuations in market prices. If fertilizer prices rise, farming could become even more expensive for farmers. This crisis will not remain limited only to India. Many developing countries around the world depend on fertilizer imports, especially several countries in Africa and Asia, where agricultural production is already based on limited resources. During the Russia-Ukraine war in 2022, the world had already seen a similar kind of crisis. At that time, the prices of wheat, corn, and sunflower oil rose sharply. The fertilizer market was also affected because Russia and Belarus are major exporters of potash fertilizers. During that crisis, food inflation reached record levels in many countries. Serious concerns about food security emerged in several poorer nations. The current Middle East crisis could create a similar danger. The only difference is that this time the problem may begin with fertilizer supply. India's public sector company FACT, meaning Fertilizers and Chemicals Travancore, is also keeping an eye on this situation. This company depends on several West Asian countries for raw materials like rock phosphate and phosphoric acid. According to FACT's managing director, 𝐮𝐸𝐿𝐵, India currently has enough urea available for the Kharif crop. But he has also said that if the war continues for several months, problems could arise in the future. Farming in India mainly happens in two seasons, Kharif and Rabi. Kharif crops are sown in June-July and harvested in September-October. Rabi crops are sown in October-November and harvested in April-May. If fertilizer supply is affected between these seasons, farmers will not get fertilizers on time. This will directly impact crop production. The most interesting part of this whole story is how complex and interconnected the world's food system is. A war taking place in one region can affect the productivity of fields thousands of kilometers away. In today's world, agriculture is no longer just the story of fields and farmers. It is tied to global supply chains, energy markets, shipping routes, and geopolitics. This crisis in the Middle East also reminds us how fragile the world's food security really is. If fertilizer supply faces a long disruption, its effects can slowly travel all the way to dining tables across the world. And perhaps that is the biggest fear in this story, that the real impact of war is not always visible immediately. Sometimes it appears months later. When less crop grows in the fields, when grain becomes more expensive in the market, and when the cost of food rises in the plate of ordinary people. In other words, the missiles of the Middle East are not just shaking borders, they may also be challenging the food security of the world in the time to come.
If our video has taught you something new, do not forget to like and share this video so that this information can reach others as well. Your likes and shares are a source of inspiration for us. If you have any questions or suggestions, please let us know in the comments. It will be our honor to answer your questions and listen to suggestions. And yes, if you like our content, subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon so that you stay connected with every new story. Thank you. GRT Business YouTube channel sources, news from various news agencies, opinion polls and other public sources. We try to ensure that every report and summary is accurate and verified, but we are not responsible for any dispute or error. Our aim is only to provide you with accurate information.